2 Samuel 3. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul became weaker and weaker. And sons were born to David at Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon of Ahinoam of Jezreel, and his second Chileab of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, and the third Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur, and the fourth Adonijah, the son of Haggith, and the fifth Shephathiah, the son of Abital, and the sixth Ithream of Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron. While there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner was making himself strong in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" Then Abner was very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head of Judah? To this day I keep showing steadfast love to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers and to his friends, and have not given you into the hand of David. And yet you charge me today with a fault concerning a woman. God do so to Abner, and more also, if I do not accomplish for David what the Lord has sworn to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba." And Ishbosheth could not answer Abner another word, because he feared him. And Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, "To whom does the land belong? Make your covenant with me, and behold, my hand shall be with you to bring over all Israel to you." And he said, "Good, I will make a covenant with you, but one thing I will require of you. That is, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face." Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, "Give me my wife Michal, for whom I paid the bridal price of 100 foreskins of the Philistines." And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, Paltiel, the son of Laish. But her husband went with her, weeping after her all the way, Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go, return." And he returned. And Abner conferred with the elders of Israel, saying, "For some time past you have been seeking David as king over you. Now then bring it about, for the Lord has promised David, saying, 'By the hand of my servant David I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines, and from the hand of all their enemies.'" Abner also spoke to Benjamin. And then Abner went to tell David at Hebron all that Israel and the whole house of Benjamin thought good to do. When Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron, David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. And Abner said to David, "I will arise and go, and will gather all Israel to my lord the king, and they may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires." So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Just then the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raid, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the army that was with him came, it was told Joab, "Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he has let him go, and he has gone in peace." Then Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Behold, Abner came to you. Why is it that you have sent him away so that he is gone? You know that Abner the son of Ner came to deceive you, and to know your going out and your coming in, and to know all that you are doing." When Joab came out of David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah. But David did not know about it. And when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into the midst of the gate to speak with him privately. And there he struck him in the stomach so that he died, for the blood of Asahel his brother. Afterward, when David heard of it, he said, "I and my kingdom are forever guiltless before the Lord for the blood of Abner the son of Ner. May it fall upon the head of Joab and upon his father's house, and may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or who is leprous, or who holds a spindle, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread." So Joab and Abishai his brother killed Abner, because he had put their brother Asahel to death at the battle of Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner." And King David followed the bier. They buried Abner at Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner. And the people wept. And the king lamented for Abner, saying, "Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, and your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen." And all the people wept again over him. Then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was still yet day. But David swore, saying, God do so to me and more also if I taste bread or anything till the sun goes down. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as everything that the king did pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's will to put to death Abner the son of Ner. And the king said to his servants, Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? And I was gentle today, though anointed king. These men, the son of Zeruiah, are more severe than I. The Lord repay the evildoer according to his wickedness. This is the word of the Lord. So a quick word about verses 1 through 5. Those are actually by this author, the commentary that we're using, by his evaluation. Those are depicting the growth of David's family in Hebron and really belong with chapter 2. So really all we're going to deal with those here is that those show that David's family is in ascendancy, where Saul's family, Saul's followers, are yet again, as we've talked about, in decline. He also mentions the fact that Rizpah is mentioned for the first time. This is in verse 7. Verses 6 to 11 really show the rift that's starting to develop in Saul's house in its initial decline. This rift between Abner and Ishbosheth. What happens is that Rizpah, who gets introduced in verse 7, Rizpah will come back to play an important role in chapter 21, the first 14 verses, but she's characterized as Saul's concubine and has children by Saul, but they're not rightful heirs to the throne of Saul as a result because she's a concubine. Ishbosheth accuses Abner in here of having slept with Rizpah. Maybe, we don't know the reasons why. We don't know if it actually even happened or not. We just know that that there was this accusation that caused the rift between the two of them. And ultimately then what happens is Abner shifts his allegiance away from Ishbosheth and towards at the end of this rift between Abner and Ishbosheth, Abner does something sort of unique. He says that he's going to do what God was going to do for David. Abner takes upon himself the responsibility to set up David over all Israel. That in verses 9 and 10. Ishbosheth was afraid to answer to him, and so you see that this power dynamic that's going on is that Abner was really the one who was in power between the two of them, and Ishbosheth was afraid of him. Abner then shifts his allegiance to David, and in verses 12 to 21 goes to visit with him. So Abner decides that he's going to contact David, and he says, tell me what it needs, what's it going to take for us to get together. And one of the first requests David makes is send me Michal, my first wife, that was for whom I paid the bride price of the 100 foreskins of the Philistines to Saul for her. And so you get that little section in there where this is sort of a peace offering, if you want to call it like that Abner sends to David. But you may find it interesting that Abner has to send word to Ishbosheth in order to get her to come. You see that in verse 14. Then David sent his messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Michal, for whom I paid the bridal price. So Ishbosheth sends Michal to David, even though it sort of was initiated by Abner. This opens the door for Abner then to come and be part of a meeting with David. And you see that in the final verses of 18 and 19. Abner went to tell David at Hebron all that Israel and the whole house of Benjamin thought good to do. And so I think they're still working on the negotiations of bringing all of the kingdom together. In verses 12 to 21, we see Abner make contact with David and actually even make some terms with David for Michal, David's first wife by Saul, to be returned to him. And so you see a little bit of good faith effort on the part of Abner to return Michal to David and help to, ease the treaty between the two of them. David, I think, is cautious of Abner in all of this, but at the same time, David welcomes him in and throws him a banquet, which shows that there's this potential for them to convene together, to be united with one another. So we have to sort of take the relationship between them at face value, that it was apparently like it was an okay thing. We don't get a lot about their initial conversation together, but this banquet tells us that there's a celebration, some type of a celebration, because that was real typical. Banquets get thrown as a celebration or of the completion of something. So we have to assume then, up through verse 22, that Abner and David have come to some terms of agreement. In verses 22 to 27, Joab, the commander of David's army, has been conspicuously absent, out raiding and coming back with the victory spoils from his raids, and hasn't been available to observe what's going on between David and Abner. But you'll also recall that Joab has a beef with Abner, because remember what Abner did. Back in chapter 2, in the Battle of Gibeon, you'll remember that their three sons of Zeruiah were there: Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel was the one that was fleet of foot and was pursuing Abner after the battle there. And when they got there, when Joab and Abishai got there, they found out that Asahel had caught up to Abner, and Abner killed Asahel, their brother. This left a pretty sour taste, obviously, in their mouth, and they mourned him, and they let Abner get away. So the fact that Abner is back and in David's presence sort of is a warning flag, I suppose, for Joab, and Joab wants to make sure that this doesn't proceed into something bigger. So Joab returns from his raid, and he discovers that Abner has celebrated this feast with David. And when Joab comes to David's presence, he actually tries to convince David that Abner, the son of Ner, is trying to act as like a double agent. He's obviously, given his history with Abner, suspicious of him, and he wants to stop anything from happening between David and Abner. Joab says, "What have you done?" In verse 26. "What have you done? Abner came to you. Why is it that you've sent him away so that he's gone? You know that Abner, the son of Ner, came to deceive you and to know you're going out and you're coming in and to know all that you are doing." Excuse me, I said 26, I meant 24. Then in verse 26, Joab leaves David's presence and secretly goes out and catches up to Abner, and they put him to death. So Joab makes sure that he and his brother put him to death, and David then catches wind of it and calls down curses on Joab and his whole household. "May it fall on the head of Joab and on all his father's house, and may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or is leprous, or has a spindle, or falls by the sword, or who lacks bread." Severe words, let's just put it that way. I mean, who calls out curses on people literally like this? And yet that's what David did. And David does sort of an unusual thing. He mourns Abner because even though he may have been suspicious about what Abner came to do, I think David also saw Abner as a man of power and as a potential for seeing these kingdoms once again united, so that all Israel would be united again. There's even something of a little psalm in there. "Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one falls before the wicked, you have fallen." And all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was still day, which would show that he wasn't mourning, but David refused to do so, and he wouldn't take bread until after the sun goes down. So everybody took notice, it says, and what the king did pleased everyone. And he really sings Abner's praises, and probably still carries with it this deep respect, I would say, for the position that Abner served in under Saul, recognizing its value. Certainly in chapter 3 here, there's a lot of narrative of just sort of the story getting set up and interactions that David has. But I guess what I'd like to focus on really here is the one key point that I like to pull out every week, which is, where do we see sort of a Christ figure in all of this? Certainly we've got some explanation of what's going on here in the day-to-day life and times of King David and the maneuverings that happen within the kingdom to see them come together. But like I say, I think the big important point would be that we would see where is a Christ figure in all of this, and why would David be a man after God's own heart? And And I think the best way to put this is still sort of like the same respect that King David had. Even though he'd been anointed king and Saul was on the decline, David was on the incline. He was already anointed king. Now David still has a respect for that office that Saul occupied as the first king of Israel. And I think David shows his willingness even to look over and be sly in his command of the people of Israel, to see them come together as a unified Israel instead of seeing them separated. I suppose you could argue that with how he calls curses down on Joab and his household, but I think all that really serves to do, the curses on Joab and his household, all that really serves to do is to point out that David had a deep respect for a unified Israel, and that Joab wasn't there. Joab was seeing to it that this division remained between the house of Saul and the house of David. It's a lot of drama that's going on here, but in the end, I think David still exemplifies for us sort of a Christ-like love, in spite of the faults and the foibles of all the different characters that are in the story here. What you see that David has this deep desire that we would all be unified. I think for us today, there's a lot of lessons we can take out of stuff like this, even in denominationalism, the differences between us as Christians. Whereas in a time like this that we find ourselves in self-quarantine and regulation, we can say amen to a lot of the resources and things that are out there that people are sharing. I've seen stuff from other church goers that aren't Lutheran Church Missouri Synod that I can say amen to. I can say, they can teach me some things. We've got a myriad of online resources that have become available to us almost overnight, given the fact that we have to stay home and away from gathering together in groups. And while they're not all Lutheran, I think there are some good things that we can find. And we can find ourselves unified under the banner of Christian. The judgment is for the Lord to make, while at the same time, that's a double-edged sword. On one side, the judgment is the Lord's to make. On the other end of the sword is the Lord doesn't withhold information from us. He gives us His Word so that we can study it and we can develop and understand doctrine that comes from it. So we too today would desire a unified Christian church body. Will that ever be until Christ returns again? I don't think so. Paul writes about it in 1 Corinthians, which is our other study, that the whole basis of the book of 1 Corinthians is that there are these divisions. And Paul acknowledges the divisions in chapter 11, where he says, I hear that there are divisions among you, and I believe it in part, that there must be divisions among us so that those of us who are genuine may be discerned. And how are we to be discerned as church or not church? How are we to be discerned as Israel or not Israel? Well, just like with David and Saul. With David followed the word of the Lord. Saul diverged and went away from the word of the Lord. So our job is to ever be mindful of, how does the Lord teach us and lead us and guide us? Well, we should always and forever be turning to His Word. And so I guess in conclusion, what we could say then is you see David's success. You see the combinations of the kingdoms starting to, at least some groundwork being laid for the kingdoms to be united. And in the end, you see that David has this heart for all Israel to come together as one, which should be shared by us, which is really comes to its fullness and completion as we're all brought together as one in the body of Christ. And I would say that that's one of the ways that we can talk about that too, is if we borrow from the New Testament a little bit, that the desire is that we would all be one. This would be in 1 Corinthians 12. There are different parts of us. There are different parts of the body. A hand can't be a hand unto itself. That whole business. But what's the goal? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as He chose. And what's the point? If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. And this is 1 Corinthians 12, by the way, and that I'm reading from. I'm kind of skipping around a little bit here, but this sort of is the key, 12:25, that there may be no division in the body, but that the members would have the same care for one another, and that we would all grow up into the head, who is Christ, and He's the one who sort of leads and guides all of this. So Christ is still evident in all of this, and that's really the key of what we're looking for, even in the story of David and Abner and the groundwork of these kingdoms coming together. Hope that helps. That's all I got for this. If you got any questions or anything, feel free to throw them in the comments, and I'll see what we can do to get them answered. Thanks. Bye.